Good morning. I'm Rowena Crosby.
And I'm Deborah Renner, and we're your co-hosts for this show. Thank you for joining us for the next 17 minutes for your Invisible Toolbox, the show that looks at the invisible tools that are essential for working effectively with people.
Now, we generally stream this show live, but this one is coming to you pre-recorded because we had a calendar conflict. Today, we're not talking about the big things, but the power of the small things and how they affect our interpersonal success. We're also going to examine how important it is to get the facts and how we're always working through situations where we want to be perceived as effective and truthful.
Facts and not alternative facts?
Alternative facts. That's certainly something that you see in the headlines these days. And while there are alternative interpretations, it's important for all of us to get the facts and not jump to conclusions. If we do, we sometimes have large unintended consequences. When we're presented with only part of the story, why do we jump to conclusions? Why do we assume facts that are not in evidence? Why don't we engage in conversations to learn more? And those are some of the topics we're going to look at today.
So we'll share some stories and examples of why the small stuff and the facts are important. And we're also going to do our table topics, which we introduced a couple weeks ago, where we're going to take your questions that you sent in, and we'll be addressing those. So let's get started. I don't think there is a better illustration about the importance of having the facts than a story that is told in the book, The Invisible Toolbox, our book, which is coming out in April, about a mother and her son. Ro, will you share that story?
I would be pleased to. The story is there's a single mother who was devoted to her son David. And one day when David was a baby, while he was sleeping, his mother went out into the garden to do a little work. And while she was in the garden, the house caught fire. And so against the better advice of her neighbors and witnesses who were trying to hold her back, she raced back into the burning house to save her son. Amazingly, she found David untouched and was able to rescue him from the fire. But unfortunately, her hair caught on fire while she was doing the rescue, and it left her face terribly scarred permanently. So despite growing up to become very successful, David had always been embarrassed about his mother's appearance and sometimes talked to others about it and commented on her ugliness. And when his mother found out about this, she was distressed, and she decided to confront him and tell him the truth about what had happened and why her face was scarred. She was killed in a bus crash on her way to go and talk to her son.
Oh, this is such a tragic story, and isn't it true he found her journal after she died?
That is the end of the story.
Yeah.
This is a true story, and he did find her journal, and here's what he learned. He learned that she had won the Miss Toronto beauty contest. He found out from her journal that her husband, his father, had been killed in a road accident when she was 6 months pregnant with him. And he also found out from that journal that she lost her hair and became scarred, saving his life from a fire.
Shows there's always more to the story.
Always more to the story.
There? And when we discover that we acted on incomplete information and don't have the facts, that just can cause such regret.
It can, and you have to believe David spent a lot of time regretting that decision.
Well, we have to challenge ourselves always to make sure we have the complete information and the facts before we're acting on something or forming an opinion.
And an opinion a lot of us have is that the small decisions in our life are not as important as the big ones. And that's going to lead us into the segment of the program we like to call Mythbuster, where we bust a commonly held myth. And the myth we're going to bust today is one many of us hold, which is don't sweat the small stuff.
We're going to shift gears from the facts to the small stuff. They say the devil is in the details, and do small decisions matter? Well, The Snowball, Warren Buffett, and the Business of Life is a biography that was written by Wall Street analyst Alice Schroeder, and it was written about Warren Buffett's life. And snowball is actually a metaphor, and it's a metaphor for describing the law of compound returns, the concept for how wealth will grow over time. So a small snowball rolling downhill gathers mass and gathers speed, which then gathers more mass and continues to increase. So the longer the hill, the larger the snowball when we're at the end of the hill. And so the longer the hill, the snowball grows. In investment terms, the longer the runway, the greater the opportunity to benefit from the compound returns. And human interactions are really no different, are they?
They aren't.
Over time, our actions and our behaviors consistently carried out multiply, like the snowball, gaining mass going down the hill. And if those small behaviors are consistently positive, our brand, or how people know us, is really positive. And if negative, well, then our brand is as well.
So goes the brand. Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And It's All Small Stuff is a best-selling book by author Richard Carlson, PhD. And Carlson inspires us to keep from getting bogged down in the little things of our life, and that will allow us to reduce our stress, achieve balance, and calm down. And those are all very worthwhile goals. But that can lead us to fall victim to the myth that by not sweating the small stuff, things are better. Actually, it turns out not sweating the small stuff has a dark side.
So minimizing or rationalizing the effect of small things is a recipe for disaster. And it's not just the negative things. If we ignore the positive things along the way, it can lead us to really miss out on those opportunities.
So it's definitely a good idea to sweat the small stuff.
It's time to look at the research surrounding our invisible tool of the week, and this week we're actually going to feature two tools. The first is get the small things right. While small behaviors and actions may not seem to have a meaningful impact, they actually do. That truth is hard for us to remember because we tend to think with big wins come big action. But small behaviors carried out consistently over time represent competitive advantage.
So what are the small behaviors or the habits that you could form that would give that same impact? If done consistently, they will create the momentum for success. We challenge you to think about 3 of those and implement them this week. 3 small behaviors that you can do repeatedly and consistently that can have an impact on your success.
Be conscious of them. That's great.
And be conscious.
Yeah. Tool number 2 is get the facts. Stop yourself from reacting to conversations, to people, to situations before you have all the facts. So not responding, but get the backstory. Go ahead and be a detective in terms of finding out what are all the facts before you find yourself forming an opinion or judging someone.
So 2 tools today to make sure you're always acting in your own best interests as well as the best interests of your organizations. Sweat the small stuff and get the facts. And now it's time for us to look at our top 2 social media picks of the week.
And those of you who follow us on social media know that we post useful content several times a day on many different interpersonal skills subjects. We've chosen 2 of this week's posts to feature today. And the first is a Forbes article, and the title of it is Little Things That Often Go Unnoticed But Make a Big Difference. And it links what we've talked about in the past 2 weeks in terms of networking and personal brand, and numerous little things are listed in this article that if you employ them will make a big difference. So check that one out. It will be on all the social media platforms today.
And our second highlighted post for the week comes to us from the New York Daily News and examines a leader's need to act on facts. The implications for managers, team members, and parents are obvious. We have to act on the facts we have, but we also have to make sure we're surrounding ourselves with others to help us get the facts. Watch for that link on Wednesday.
So what is the small stuff you're facing today? Are you taking pains to carefully craft the wording in an email or a text? Or maybe you're struggling with the best way to be able to express gratitude to a colleague or a message to your employer, crafting that message just perfectly. The small things that are on your plate today, they're important things.
And this is truly an inspiration story that we're going to share with you now. While they may not seem like they matter, in the moment. It's the accumulation of all of these small things over time that really determines our successes or our failures. And the story we want to share with you is the story of a man named Walter Pavlo. He was a discontented manager at MCI Communications and started taking advantage of their lax accounting standards. Over the course of time, and his little path of small decisions and dishonesty led to $6 million in fraud and a 2-year prison sentence. Post-prison, he has the following advice to provide to all of us. It starts with a small decision, he says, that incrementally got worse and worse. You tell yourself your intentions are good at first, but then you find yourself in a place that you don't recognize. It's tough to get back.
The path to corruption for him started with one small step, and it didn't seem like it would have any consequences or it would harm anyone, and it would be better that it had been a positive step. Well, now we're going to be into the segment of our program called Table Topics. We did this a couple weeks ago. We have some questions that you submitted, and they're formulated around leadership and teams this week, and so we're going to take turns taking some of your questions and then answering them. Ro, would you like to start?
I would love to start.
All right. A lot of people are thinking about this on a daily basis and quarterly as well. What's the best way to coach an employee for improved performance?
And we love that question, and we're so glad that someone asked it, and it relates beautifully to our topics of the day. So when we're looking for opportunities to coach employees, we need to get the facts. Very rarely does a leader have the full picture, and sometimes we jump to the conclusion that an employee's behavior may not have been appropriate. As leaders, we need to first get the facts and confirm that. We do that with open-ended questions that will give us information around the context they're working in, the choices that they made, and the behaviors that they actually used, and those outcomes. And then additionally, we want to make sure that we focus on specific behaviors, the small things, and those are the things employees can really influence with their own behavior and their own performance. Rather than focusing on outcomes in coaching, focus on the small things that employees can do day to day that will lead to those desired outcomes.
That's great.
You ready for a question?
Yes, absolutely.
How do I handle a conversation with a colleague on my team who doesn't seem to have a valid point?
Oh. How do we do that? How do we handle that conversation with a colleague that doesn't have a valid point? Well, this is what we don't want to do. We don't want to say, that isn't valid, or you're wrong. But we do want to create some understanding between us in terms of working through that point. And so the best way to start that conversation is to dignify the essence of the point itself. So a common ground statement like, it's important to both of us that we talk about this. That puts you in a collaborative state to work through the understanding of that point together. And then the key that came from your answer a minute ago, the open-ended question, asking then the open-ended question. And it might be something like, why do you feel this way? Or what has led you to think this? And sincerely with vocal tone, sincere vocal tone with eye contact, and sincerely wanting to know where their thoughts, what has led them to have that point, rather than forming an opinion. Again, it's getting the facts. We don't have the facts of why they have the point. We just think that maybe the point isn't valid. Let's not decide that until we explore it a little bit more.
And what a much better approach than the point counterpoint that we often get into.
Absolutely. All right, let's try this one. Oh, what if I have the facts, but due to timelines or confidentiality, I cannot share all of them? How best is that handled?
That's a common dilemma we have as leaders, is we do have the facts, but sometimes timing or non-disclosure, confidentiality means we can't share all the facts. People expect honesty. They don't always expect complete openness. People understand that. So as leaders, we're wise to share the information that we can and then let people know when further information will be coming. They understand that things need to be kept confidential. And I think we've got time for one more, Deb.
All right.
So this is from a viewer who said, you talked about consistency in visual messages last week. What about how people behave?
Oh, consistency was so important. We had Becky Rupiper Green here, and we were talking about the consistency of our visual image. What about our interaction? It's the snowball. Our interactions have to be consistent, and they need to be positive in order for people to be able to trust us. And so if we have small, consistent actions, people can count on us, and that's pretty important on a daily basis.
And we're getting our sign that it's time to wrap up. Thank you for joining us today. If you missed any portion of this show, or if you want to share it with others, you'll find the entire program loaded up to the Tero YouTube channel. Please join us again next Monday morning at 9:03 Central Time, where we're going to explore a topic that's on a lot of people's minds these days, workplace civility. And we are so delighted that our special guest is going to be Scott Racker, who's the director of the Ray Center over at Drake University and responsible for the Character Counts program.
That's going to be fabulous.
It is.
Well, now it's your turn. We welcome your feedback and suggestions. What people challenges are you facing on a daily basis? What kinds of things would you like to see us address, either regarding leadership, teams, customer interactions, any interpersonal skill area? You can email your questions or show ideas to ideas@yourinvisibletooolbox.com. You'll see the email address below. Or go out to your favorite social media platform, check out the posts we talked about, and interact with us out there. Let us know what would be relevant for you for us to cover on the show. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, do subscribe. That way you'll be alerted to when the show airs. We'd like to give a thank you to Kyle Plummer for directing and being our cameraman on this show today.
And before we sign off, we'd like to remind you that the program title, Your Invisible Toolbox, is also the title of a book that Deb and I recently authored, and it will be coming out a little later this month. So stay tuned, and we'll give you some feedback and some input on where and when you can get a copy of the book. Thank you for joining us, and that's a wrap.